Okay, well, we're as close to 10:30 as possible. We may get joined by some people as we move on, but I know that we've got a lot of information to get across to you today. So first of all, thank you very much for joining us on this Tech Bytes webinar. You're with us today is Luca from Airtame, and he's going to be talking you through a lot of the Airtame solutions and exactly how they can be utilized within your businesses and with your customers. My name's Kyle Hillier. I'm the head of AV product at Northamber. We're really grateful for you taking the time out to join us today, and hopefully you'll find it useful for future business. So if you've got any questions, as always with these things, I think most people are pretty adept now with doing webinars and attending these sorts of sessions. So if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll try to answer them as we go through. If not, there is some time at the end where we can open up the chat for some questions. But I'm going to hand over to Luca now, and he's going to go through the Airtame solutions. So over to you, please, Luca.
Thank you, Kyle. And just to double check, you can hear me all right?
Yep, I can hear you okay.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I could see there's a lot of familiar names in the attendees list, and we're very excited about this recent launch that we've done with Northamber. And for the people that aren't familiar with Airtame, hopefully, today will trigger an interest. And for the people that already are familiar with Airtame, hopefully today will give you some more insight into what the solution can do for you. So first and foremost, my name is Luca. I've been at the company for just about 4.5 years now. I manage the UK market, having also spent some time in the US market before then. And I'm very excited to bring this, presentation to you guys today. I'll also introduce the rest of the UKI team who are also joining us in just a moment. So just a quick and short agenda that we have. We have obviously an introduction into Airtame as a company, introduction into our team, our UKI team specifically. Then we're going to touch upon the problem that we generally see in the market currently, the solution associated with it, which is, again, the Airtame solution. And then, of course, a demonstration of actually how the solution works. And I can show you in real time how to actually connect to the Airtame, how to manage it, and everything in between. So first and foremost, we have a little introduction into Airtame as a company, just to kind of give you a little bit of context of where we come from, what we've done. So we're a Danish company. You might already be able to identify that my accent is a little off. So I am also Danish. I am also actually doing this conversation or doing this webinar from my Danish apartment. We were founded in 2013 and have grown almost 100% year on year on average since then. We now have our HQ in Copenhagen, but we also have offices across the globe. In New York, we have a large office with about 20 salespeople. In Los Angeles, we have another office, as well as also an office in Budapest. We also have distribution partners on a global scale, obviously with our recent acquisition of, adding Northamber to the portfolio of channel partners. But beyond that, we also have presence in the US, Canada, and the Nordics, France, Germany, Benelux, Singapore, and Australia. And all this presence then actually equates to 20,000 unique customers. So unique customers is a unique organization having purchased Airtame. And that equals to about 200,000 Airtame sold since 2013. So we have a really nice market share. We have a lot of users out there that are using Airtame on a daily basis. And that also leads to the second last bullet point here that we actually, this is pre-COVID, seeing that, most people are working from home now, but we were in February up and powering 1 million monthly meetings and classes. We are seeing that number is now beginning to creep back up to that tally as more and more the world opens up. But as soon as we get UK on board as well, I'm sure that will be surpassing 1 million in the near future. And then a final bullet point to kind of end up with before I move into sort of the solution is that we also are deemed the market leaders in education, both in the US and in EMEA. So we're not only a solution tailored for businesses. We're also a solution with a nice foothold on the educational market. All right, so following slide I have here, probably some familiar faces for a lot of you. We have some nice veterans having joined us in recent months. Scott Harper, who I'm sure also is on the call right now. He recently joined us back in February as sort of a channel manager focused on actually the entire of EMEA and Oceania, but with sort of a focus on the UK. Ryan McKelvin, he joined us just a few weeks back and has really already, got familiar with the Airtame, throughout quite a few of these webinars already and a bunch of training. So he'll be working a lot with the likes of you, resellers, and end customers. And then of course myself. And what we are available to do at any time is joint demos with your customers, on-site demos when we get the chance to do so, and just generally training and anything else that you may need. So let's lead into actually what the Airtame solution is instead of just talking about us as a company. What we've noticed is throughout the past few years, there's this uptake in using screens once more. What I mean by that is that more and more classrooms, if we look at an educational blueprints, more and more screens are being implemented across different departments. It doesn't have to just be classrooms. It could also be corridors, it could be cafeterias, it could be lobbies, wherever essentially. However, the issue with more screens is that there's generally also more issues tied with them. So as you can see, this is another blueprint for typical business environment, where again, you have your screen in your meeting room. That screen might have a solution associated with it, such as just a regular HDMI cable, but it could also be a wireless screen sharing solution. And that could be the go-to solution for that screen. Now, if we take a step back, a step outside of that meeting room, we have screens in the corridors. These corridor screens are probably being used to show some sort of curated content. Now, that content could be hosted on a mini PC of some sort. This is that solution for hosting that content now. Now, we don't only have screens in these locations, we also have screens in lobbies, or we have screens in departments. And there you might be using a third or fourth solution, such as like a mini Chromebit of some sort. And that Chromebit could be hosting some sort of dashboard. If it's in the sales department, it could be a dashboard showing sales metrics in the form of diagrams and graphs. Now, what we've already acquainted to is that there's now 3 or 4 solutions for your screens across an environment. Obviously, with so many separate point solutions, you're going to have so many closed ecosystems and so many closed management systems. This generally means that it's a lot more time consuming to actually have to manage all these separate solutions, and that the customization options are very limited. So we want to go away from having so many separate solutions for your screens and instead have one unified platform. So Airtame is essentially that solution. A lot of you might be familiar with already the fact that we're obviously a wireless screen sharing solution. It's sort of the core of our business. And we'll touch upon that later and showcase how actually that works. But where we're very different is that we also incorporate a lot of other use cases. We incorporate a main use case that's increasingly more and more popular, the ability to actually have digital signage on all your screens. Not only screens in your corridor or reception areas where you may be more familiar with having it, but what about all that real estate that you have on the in your meeting rooms, in your classrooms? Why not actually transform that from being a black screen to actually something more interactive, something that actually brings value to that environment? And of course, the third row that we have here is very important as well, because we want to make sure that the IT admin or the IT team or whoever essentially is in charge of managing these Airtames can do it at ease. And that's what the Cloud Management Console is for. So we'll be taking you through all these 3 use cases and showcasing actually how it works and give you a little bit more context so you can relate to it. And of course, at the end of the day, what we want to get at is when the customer purchases a screen, there's a use case associated with it. And that use case can be accomplished by plugging an Airtame into it. We want obviously to allow the IT admin to have one management console where they could control all their screens use cases from that central management system. So this is sort of just a quick introduction into the solution, but I can understand I haven't really shown you actually how it works just yet. And I think actually the next slide will just do that. So to kickstart the next chapter here is we have just a short video just to kind of break up the presentation a little bit, to give you an understanding of what the product actually looks like, what the hardware looks like. I'm sure you guys are, probably familiar with a lot of other solutions out there that are more like box solutions. We want to show you what the hardware looks like at Airtame and how easy and convenient it is to manage. So I have this slide here with a video that I'm just going to kind of talk over. So this is the Airtame 2 box. If you open up the Airtame 2 box, you'll find that there's obviously an Airtame 2 in it. There's a magnetic mount, there's a manual, and then there's a cable with a power plug. The cable, you plug that obviously into your HDMI input of your display, and then the other end of that cable, you have 2 plugs. You have a USB-A for your power plug, and you have a USB-C for your Airtame device. So once that's plugged in, this is sort of on the back end of what it could look like. Now, if we zoom in on the Airtame, you can see we have the USB-C in the middle, Kensington lock on the left side to physically secure it, and a micro USB for accessories like Ethernet adapters and so forth. Now, mounting your solution can be very difficult at times, but with Airtame, you just use that magnetic mount. You can place it on the back of the TV. That's probably the most popular use case. But if you don't have a magnetic surface, you can use the adhesive and even make the Airtame visible to the user so that when they walk into the meeting room, the first thing they see is this clean look, clean meeting room with a screen and then an Airtame associated with it. So that's really the video I wanted to show you. And now I want to kind of lead into, actually showcasing the capabilities of Airtame. Now, just to kind of add to that video that we just went through, you can see here again, Airtame will work with any display. Obviously, most displays will have HDMI inputs these days, but if you do have a VGA or DVI input, we're also compatible with that. It works with any network. We work wired, wirelessly, or even using a PoE. We have a PoE adapter that's readily available through Northamber as well. We also work across, various authentications that your environment may have, whether it be behind a certificate encrypted network, behind a proxy. We'll always make sure that the Airtame is, completely up to date with the most standard and most secure networks that are in place in, across different businesses and different educational environments. And I think also we may have already established, but the Airtame does have a very small footprint. Not only is a small solution, but it doesn't require any sort of drilling. It's extremely convenient, extremely easy to actually have installed in an environment. So now we get on to the more exciting stuff. Now, if we take the most common use case in the meeting room, we want to create an environment where it's safe to collaborate for not only employees but guest users. And obviously, we want to be able to do that wirelessly. So Airtame will first and foremost allow you to do a hands-free screen sharing. We're complete software-based or native agnostic-based, meaning that there's no dongles that you're going to be passing around. There's no HDMI cable that you have to pass around. You're only touching your personal device and nothing else. So instead of actually just talking over this slide, I'm just going to exit the presentation. Let me open up the Airtame app here. So this is the Airtame application. As you can see, we have 2 Airtames listed here. These are 2 Airtames that I've set up in my home environment. Usually you'd obviously have a lot more in our office space. We would have about 50 Airtames in place that I could easily scroll through or search for by name. Now, you can also star the Airtame that you use on a regular basis. All these functionalities that are pretty straightforward to the regular screen sharing user. Now, what we want to reiterate here is the ease of use, being able to connect to the Airtame without ever having used it before, but more importantly for the non-tech savvy user, that they can walk in with confidence knowing how to actually connect to the solution. So it's as simple as finding the Airtame that you want to connect to, hovering your mouse cursor over it, whereafter you can then share a specific window or share your entire screen. So if I want to connect to the room called Copenhagen room here, I can press share screen, and it's as easy as that. I'm now connected to the device Copenhagen room, and I'm sharing my content wirelessly. The second bullet point on the slide that we just left said that you could also wirelessly share to multiple displays. And this is a growing use case that we see more and more popular, and also a use case that we're very uniquely provide, as I'm not too sure there's many other solutions that do that. If I wanted to connect to London room, I could add the screen to that session. So now we see, meeting rooms getting more and more displays in them, classrooms becoming more and more interactive with, 2 or 3 screens in them. The presenter can not only be untethered from the front of the room, but they could roam around whilst connected to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 screens simultaneously. Each stream will be in sync with one another. And that also goes for if you stream a video that contains audio playback. They'll all actually be in sync with one another. So you're not going to be afraid of, one of them having some sort of distorted sound because it's a few milliseconds slower than another. Of course, you can see I connected to these 2 Airtames rather seamlessly. You can add a PIN code so that if you try to connect to the Airtame, you have to type in a randomly generated 4-digit code into the app in order to connect to it. And this will ensure that we, further protect the Airtames so we don't have anyone accidentally connect to the wrong room. But for the sake of demoing today, I've just, disabled them. So of course, I can disconnect individually, or I could just press disconnect up here and I'll disconnect from them all simultaneously. So the process of actually connecting to an Airtame is extremely convenient and easy. It takes you, just a few seconds to open up the app and then press share screen, and you're then off to the races.
Luca, we've had a question come in from Terry Goodwin asking, is there a limit to the number of screens you can share to?
Yeah, really good question, Terry. So there's actually not really a specific limit. It really would actually depend on a few parameters. I think the main parameter that I would highlight is what kind of hardware you have. So not necessarily tied to the Airtame, but actually tied to your laptop. So let's say you're using a laptop that has like an i5 processor, it's like an 8th gen processor, and you have a typical 8 GB of RAM. A modern laptop like this would easily be able to connect to up to like 15 Airtames before you'd start, taking a little bit more toll on that CPU that you have, and it's also using more bandwidth now. So what I'm trying to get at is that you can easily connect to multiple Airtames without having to worry about it. I generally say everything above 10 Airtames without knowing the hardware or anything is where you want to just be a bit more cautious.
Great, thank you for that. And another question we've had in is, when sharing to multiple screens, how are the PIN codes managed? Would you need to go to each display in turn? Yeah,
that's a really good question as well. Let me just actually really quick enable a PIN code so you can see what that looks like. So the settings I've accessed here are settings that you can access through the app. Usually we would just password protect them and then just only manage it from the cloud, which I'll show you in a moment. But if I were to try to connect to Copenhagen room now, you can see it's not as easy as it was before. I have to type in a 4-digit code. I don't know what the 4-digit code is, but if I were to guess 4545, you'll see that unless I guessed it, it would just kick me out. But if you wanted to connect to multiple Airtames that have PIN code in, it does require that you have a line of sight that you can connect to them. Now, I don't know if this was you, Terry, still asking that same question, but I'll show you in just a moment in the Airtame Cloud how you can take full ownership of screens in bulk and change the content being displayed on them. Not from a streaming perspective, but then from a signage perspective. So that will sort of solve that potential use case.
Great.
Cool.
Hopefully that was, and then just a final one final question we've got so far. We'll do it now. We've interjected. Is the solution just wireless within a location, or extended to wider access via the cloud?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. I mean, it depends how you set the Airtame up. The Airtame will work by integrating with your network infrastructure. You can do that wirelessly, always reestablished, using a PoE or Ethernet adapter. Now, it does require that you're on the same network or VLAN. So what I mean by that is that the Airtame can work and traverse across multiple VLANs, like if you have a guest network, internal network, a corporate network, and a third, fourth VLAN, whatever. doesn't matter what VLAN you're on, as long as you've set it up in that manner that you can actually connect to it. If you want to connect it, to an Airtame and share your content wirelessly in another location, it requires that network infrastructure is like a WAN network that allows for, global discovery. That can be set up, but it again depends on that environment that we're looking at, and that's where we also provide free network support and technical support, and we can definitely look in and see what they're looking to accomplish. But again, that does tie a little bit to what I'm about to show you guys later, and that's the signage aspect of it. Being able to remotely, through the cloud, as you said, be able to change the content being displayed on each and every Airtame. Okay. I think, did another question come in, or was that just maybe?
Yes, there's one more that's just come in. Do guests have to download the app to access it?
Yeah, you actually led me on to the next bullet point that I was going to address, so thanks. I'm just going to go back into the presentation here, guys. There we go. So the question was, do you need to use an application? And I know that, applications can often scare people. Let me just quickly address that our proprietary Airtame application here, that comes as a regular exe file, even though that's probably not the most popular. But it also then comes as a guest portable app that does not rely on admin rights. So a lockdown laptop would still be able to use that with ease. And there's an MSI version of the application or Jamf version of the application in case you want to deploy it out on a bulk scale to your enterprise environment. Furthermore, we realize that we want to, even though that the Airtame proprietary app, in our opinion and our users' opinion, is the most user-friendly and provides the most value, we do want to create an environment where it's unbiased, that you come in and you decide how you want to connect to. We're not going to, force feed you. We're not going to tell you, you have to use the Airtame application in order to connect to the Airtame. So we do also work with all native casting integrations. So we work with AirPlay, we work with Mirrorcast, and we work with Google Cast. You can decide if you want to enable these protocols or disable them. So you also get full control and ownership of what protocols are being used. Maybe you want to add Mirrorcast, which is a peer-to-peer way of connecting from Windows laptops and Android devices. Great, but maybe you're not too much of a fan of how, Google Cast works, and you could disable that. But of course, you want to enable AirPlay for your iPhone, iPad, Mac users so they can connect natively. You can enable that. What you'll find, though, is that your regular users will start reverting back to the Airtame application. But guest users maybe, will really like this function, or again, the freedom of choice to decide, how do I want to connect to it? Do I want to use a guest app that won't rely on admin rights, or do I want to use something native? And from your really personal devices like your mobile phones and iPads, that's where we will always suggest using the native casting protocols, because again, a lot of these personal devices will be their home devices that they might be using. We don't want to tell them they have to download an app from the App Store or the Google Play Store to actually use the Airtame. Cool. I didn't see any notifications for any more questions come in, but Kyle, keep me posted otherwise.
I'll keep barging in, my friend. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. But yeah, so at the end of the day, we want to create this environment where we're reducing touches. Anyone can connect. It's convenient and easy. But this is just the screen sharing part of it. And actually, sorry about that. Let me just rewind, because the logo has reminded me at the bottom here that I didn't mention that we're also compatible with the Airtame application on Mac, Linux, and Chromebook. And Chromebook actually being one of the only ones out there that are fully compatible and have a working application. That's a lot because of our large education presence in the US, where the school districts are really heavily Chrome OS environments. But yeah, what I wanted to say then was that, beyond the screen sharing, there's a lot more that happens in a meeting room. So you have an Airtame plugged into a screen, it's in your meeting room, it's in your classroom. Now let's use that 55-inch TV or 65-inch or however big you go for something more than just screen sharing. Let's actually use it when it's not in use. You can have unified content now being displayed on every screen across every meeting room. Some cloud apps I'm going to get into in a bit are also use cases like announcements, hygiene reminders. You could have a slideshow being shown in that meeting room going through, COVID-19 guidelines. But the second sub bullet point here is actually my favorite one, and that's meeting schedules. We all, are familiar with walking into a meeting room only to be kicked out 5 minutes later because it was actually booked, but we didn't really know it. I'm going to show you what that looks like later on as well. But you now walk into the room and you know that you're in the right room, or you walk into a room that you know is available, and then you can quickly book it in confidence that you're not going to be kicked out. You can also broadcast synchronized video announcements to all screens using one of our apps, YouTube Live. And then very important, I think, is to mention is that you share the ownership of the content. In this way, we mitigate any risk of, content aging, that you now all of a sudden have a slideshow from 2015 with your old brand on it. We want to make that ownership of content extremely easy so that you can make sure everything's up to date, your brand is up to date, and it just really, just gives you a good look for external guests, but also, for internal communication. Now, as we did earlier, let's take a step back, a step out of that meeting room. And then we have offices, hallways, reception areas, and so on. Here we want to make sure that we're providing the right message in the right place and always at the right time. So like before, we can still use these screens to share announcements, safety information, distancing rules, schedules. So schedules, what I mean by that, it could be you have 10 meeting rooms on this floor, you could have a screen with an Airtame plugged into it, and that Airtame will showcase the meeting rooms availabilities for all 10 meeting rooms. So you can look at that and you can know for confidence, let me go to meeting room 5, it's available for the next 2 hours. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment as well. You could generally also have just unified content with screens and meeting rooms and other spaces. You could decide if you want to unify or if you want to, split it. Or this can be managed remotely through the Airtame cloud. And again, the final bullet point is to share the ownership once more. A few use cases that we've seen very popular. Using the Airtame to host a map of the campus, map of the building. You know where to go. Use that screen. I've seen too many reception room screens or lobby screens being blank. Health and safety guidelines, which is very popular now, and we also, as a company, we're trying to do our utmost to help and provide some templates that are freely available to use and have uploaded on your Airtame device. Schedules, as we discussed, announcements, menus, dashboards. So that's where Airtame will work with several different dashboard service providers that you can use with the Airtame, and there's a bunch out there like Clipfolio, Geckoboard, and many more where you can get the URL for that dashboard and paste that into the browser of the Airtame. And now Airtame is hosting that, such as a media player would. Okay, so I think I've made enough references to the Airtame cloud. So I think it's time to actually move into it. If I just exit this once more, I'm going to open up my Chrome tab here, and I'm already logged into our cloud account. So the cloud console is your management console that lets you manage all your Airtames and administer them remotely and collectively. This helps reduce touches. Once you've set up the Airtame, you don't ever have to walk into that room again. You can do all the management from here. It reduces time, travel, and costs as well, because of all of it can again be managed from here. In here, you see we have multiple different groups. We have Copenhagen. I can collapse that group, New York, Los Angeles, Toronto, and you might you might be building an idea that these are the different locations that Airtame has, and that's correct. These are different offices across the globe. I scrolled down, I collapsed as many groups until I came to Copenhagen remote, because that's where I've placed my home Airtames. So you can see we have Copenhagen room and London room listed here. You may notice that all 3 Airtames in this group are currently online and idle, with the exception of the bottom room being offline. And you can see how long it's been offline for as well. And it doesn't stop there. Let's say you connect to London room. And once I press start, share and go back into the cloud, you'll see the status actually went from being online and idle to streaming. So you now know in real time that that Airtame is currently in use and shouldn't start, you shouldn't start rebooting it or configuring its settings. So you know the active status of every Airtame. If I disconnect, of course, what will happen is it will return to being in that online idle state. Online idle state equals signage, basically, whatever signage you have in place on the Airtame. You can see the network SSID it's connected to, the version number of the firmware. It's all running 3.9.1, the newest firmware. But if we go to Los Angeles, you can actually see some of them are running 3.9.0. And with the blue button here, it reminds you that these Airtames are actually out of date and need updating. You don't have to go and unplug the Airtames and plug them into a system and update them. You can update them remotely from here, either by individually updating them or selecting multiple, and in the top right corner, pressing update. Now, let's go to New York. So New York is pretty remote from where I am, at least. And you can see that we have, an Airtame called Test Bench. Let's actually find something that's not like a test Airtame. So we'll go to New York City here. Great. Display full in New York City. I can select that Airtame and I can press Edit Settings in the top right corner, whereafter I can actually configure the settings of that Airtame remotely. I can add a sleep schedule. I can enable the Google Cast, Miracast, or AirPlay protocols. I can change the device's name in case we move it around. The orientation of the screen, you might be using a portrait screen and some signage areas. Then we also have the overlay. The overlay is like a text box on your screen where you can configure a guide that tells you user how to connect to the Airtame. So this will be on top of the signage. And of course, that's extremely important in your meeting rooms because we want to make sure users can walk in and connect without ever having to look at a piece of paper that's stuck to the wall or have to call IT. Instead, they just look at the only screen in that room or however many screens it is, and they have the simple guide in front of them. The guide is already predefined, but if you want to customize it to make it unique to your environment, whether it be more concise or thorough, you can do that. Below we have then our first introduction into what signage you can do. Image upload, or use the Chromium-based browser to upload a URL. So this is where really we expand that signage use case. The browser can actually support the likes of AppSpace, Now Signage, Screen Cloud, and much more, where you could put in the URL for their solution, and the Airtame will be able to host that and be a screen sharing solution at the same time. Much more you can do in here, but you don't have to make these changes individually. You can create, well, not create, but you can select multiple Airtames across locations, across countries, and configure the devices in bulk as well. So it's going back to, apologies, the name slipped my mind, but the question I got earlier from being able to, connect to multiple Airtames, like across locations or whatever it is. Instead, you could actually select all the Airtames that you want to change and change your background. It could be for announcements. It could be maybe because you have a vendor visiting or partner visiting and you want to change all the backgrounds to like a welcome message. You can do that remotely. You don't have to be on site, especially now where it's even more important that you can do some of these things remotely. The IT admin or whoever's in charge, the marketing manager, can do this from their personal device. On that note of who's in charge, there's a team section in the bottom left corner where you can invite users, as well as also then decide on how much access they should have. Are they a content manager? Are they a device and content manager? Or are they just an administrator who can do everything? You can decide which groups they should have access to. So maybe Daniel, who I've selected, should only have access to Copenhagen and Copenhagen remote. So the next time Daniel logs into the cloud, he can only see the Airtames associated with those two groups and nothing else. All right, so just wrapping up the cloud, we then have a premium section of it. So everything I've shown you thus far is actually free, something we offer for free, along with obviously purchasing Airtame through you guys. But then there's a screen section that comes at a premium. The screen section here, you can see it's a little bit different from the user interface that we had under devices. Now what happens is that each Airtame has a screen associated with it. And you actually get to see a live preview of what is being shown on each and every display that has an Airtame into it. So for instance, Copenhagen room, let's take that. Copenhagen room here is displaying obviously a guide on how to connect to the Airtame. It has time. Obviously, we're an hour ahead of you guys in Copenhagen, so otherwise this would be 11:07. And this Airtame is actually using that schedule I told you about. That application integration, or whatever you like to call it, available, lets you integrate with Office 365 or G Suite to then host the availability of that specific meeting room that the Airtame's in. So you can see right now that I've booked this meeting room for the Northamber webinar from 11:30 to 12:30. But after that meeting, this room is actually available all day. So if I were to go over 12:30, I wouldn't be too worried right now because I know for confidence that no one's booked it after my meeting. It could also be that someone else walks into this room now, and even if I'm not sitting there, they're like, oh, should we take the chance that they finished early, or should we just find another room that we know is available? I think, Kyle, a question came in.
We just had a question come in. I'll read it word for word.
Okay.
What if we don't want Joe Blogs to connect to our devices and want to ensure it's locked down to corporate users? Can I hide the SSID of the device?
Of course. It's up to you if you want to actually broadcast the SSID. Let me go back into the settings real quick, and I'll make sure I segue back into the screens afterwards, because I'm sure there's a bit more in there as well. You can see actually this Airtame here doesn't have any SSIDs broadcasted. So you decide if you want the Airtame to broadcast its own SSID. The only reason why you would want that really is if you're using Airtame's own SSID for like a guest connectivity, or using Miracast, which is peer-to-peer, requiring an extra SSID. But when the Airtame is connected to your network, either wirelessly or using a PoE or Ethernet adapter, you're setting it up how you want. So you're putting it on a VLAN that has access to the internal corporate network. Maybe you only want that access, but if you have other environments where you wanted to have access to the guest and internal corporate network, you can do that. So this way you literally decide on who should have access to discover the Airtames and who shouldn't. The SSID being broadcast, that's not even mandatory. You can disable it on all of them. You can see actually there's a section in the cloud that says AP, which is basically access point for the Airtame. And you can see most of them are actually disabled because we're not using them. Let me know if you had a follow up to that question. I'm happy to elaborate.
I think that's it.
Cool. But then, yeah, moving back in here, and I think actually on that note, I do want to, if I connect to London Room now, I mentioned that you'd be able to see a live preview of what is being shown. I did not mention that this is only when the Airtame is idle. So I connected to London Room just now, and London Room in the cloud in the screen section now is blacked out because someone's streaming to it. So you're not going to be able to peek in on anyone's meeting, anyone's class. The stream that you're streaming never actually reaches the cloud. It's encrypted within your network. So if I wanted to see what was happening, I wouldn't be able to. I can only see the signage, which is non-confidential. And of course, if I disconnect, what will happen is the London Room will then pull the most up-to-date screenshot and have that listed instead. And I think, Kyle, did another question come in as well?
Yep, we've got one more come in. On the resolution side of Airtame, can it support ultra stretch screens like the LG 86BH5C?
Okay, I'm not too familiar with that screen, unfortunately. And I can definitely also make sure I give you guys a more sort of thorough answer as we, make sure we send this deck out afterwards. But at least what I can tell you is the Airtame, will support full HD. You can also change your resolution input on the back end here of each and every Airtame to make sure that that Airtame matches the resolution of your screen. So the ultra wide one, I just have to double check. I don't want to, over promise or under promise anything right now. So I'm sure we have your name in the comment section, and I'll make sure to get back to you on that. Great. Was there a follow-up to that? Or another question?
I'll just
sorry.
Yeah. The LG Stretch display has multiple inputs with PIP, so we can use that more than one Airtame and schedule separately.
Okay, lovely. But yeah, we're very that, and I think there's a cap on how much, like where my technicality, my tech knowledge kind of stops, and then we have some guys and girls that are extremely competent on that note that we're very happy to bring in on these conversations to kind of assist me further. But yeah, I just wanted to wrap this section up, and I'll make sure I take any other questions then. So we saw how you could, be able to see the screenshot of each and every screen, make sure that the formatting is correct, the signage is correct, everything looks, flawless. Again, now the content manager doesn't have to be on site. They can just look in here and configure it. Now, again, you reduce touches, you reduce time travel, well, not time travel, you reduce the time required to travel, and so on. This is another integration available. This is what I suggested having outside of the meeting rooms, maybe in the reception area or the corridor, because the Airtame will showcase multiple rooms and their availability. So you can see how most of our rooms are currently available. We've actually opened up our office now in Denmark. So usually it would be pretty blocked, but because today is one of our Christian national holidays, people on holiday today. So that's why we just have, Northamber webinar and the UKI strategy. But otherwise, if I walked into, had a client with me and I looked at the screen, I could, in confidence know that I could walk to any of these rooms and they would be available. So, which is great. Again, we add more flow to that whole experience of walking into a room. It's more productive. You walk out and that's it. There's many other apps that you can make use of. You can see, for example, this one here is running through a slideshow. It's running through a COVID-19 guidelines slideshow. And you can see also this screen here doesn't have a guide. So you don't necessarily need a guide. You can remove it if you're using it only to showcase content, like curated content. Now, let's show you what the backend looks like. If you select this Airtame in here in the screen section, you get a different interface when you want to edit it. So this one's running the home screen app. If we configure that, you can see how it's authenticated with Google Calendar or 365. You select the room it's in, and then it will host that availability. You can then customize the image, the logo, the text of the guide, and all that. Once you've selected an app you want, you can actually create a playlist as well for it to rotate through multiple apps throughout a day. So I could add another app now if I wanted to. So here we already have the image and website that we've addressed. Obviously that creates, a big use case, especially with the browser of the Airtame. But then we also have other apps like Unsplash, World Clock, Trello, Google Slides, OneDrive, YouTube, all these different things. You decide on which apps are applicable to your use case. And you can have it now, create a playlist and rotate through that content. That content can be rotated based on different time intervals and so forth. But this section here is something we're constantly building out and adding apps, on a regular basis. So this is going to be extremely exciting. It already is extremely exciting, but even more exciting in the near future. Great. So that does wrap up the cloud part. So I have a few more slides as we look at wrapping up here. But was any questions to this before I move forward?
I haven't seen any come in, so if
okay.
we can always, we've got a couple of minutes left at the end. We can always wrap up with any questions. We can go back.
Perfect. All right then. So I think actually the next slide, says even wrapping up. Perfect. So wrapping up here, we have 2 more slides. The first slide, full disclosure, is created by me. So this is based on our market knowledge, our market research. You can see we obviously have the x-axis. X-axis indicates the price, the cost of the solution from on the right-hand side of the screen, least expensive to most expensive. Then we have B2B functionalities on the y-axis. It's a bit vague, B2B functionalities, but consider B2B functionality having, being able to authenticate with an enterprise-grade network, being able to have native caching protocols, being able to have a remote management console, having signage capabilities, so forth. So I want to show you guys this graph because it's a really good indication of where we are in the market. We have obviously Chromecast, Apple TV, and then not Mirrorcast, is more like the Microsoft Wireless adapters at the very least expensive solutions, but also they're created for home users. They're created for your different streaming services, and they're not great. They're not agnostic. They're not solutions that are managed in a business environment. So you can see where Airtame actually is located is very, very, very price competitive, while still actually providing a lot of different use cases, especially where we see that even users purchase Airtame purely at times for its signage, where they're not even looking at screen sharing yet. And then, of course, then they decide and look into it further and find out that actually Airtame could also solve their cable management issue for screen sharing. So this is where we're very unique, because what we also see with that is we do have very, very large rollouts where you might find some environments with 1 or 2 wireless screen sharing solutions in their really nice boardrooms. But what about the other 100 rooms? What about the other 50 rooms or however many rooms it is? What about them? Do they just get left with HDMI or VGA cables? Because at times they won't be able to afford a lot of these other solutions in every single room. That's where we can often come in and provide a very competitive price to allow them to actually think larger and beyond those main boardrooms.
We've had a question come in, Luca, that might be prevalent at this point. They've asked, my clients using Zoom for their VC systems, can they use Airtame with their VC?
Great question. And I hope we have the names, because we actually just recently released an article on how you could use Airtame with your video conferencing. Because I would rather share that, because just for the sake of time now and just wrapping up, I'd rather share something a little bit more concrete so I don't skip anything or miss out on anything. So if possible, if Carl, if you have the name of the person asking that question, if I could send that over afterwards, that would probably be more convenient.
Yeah, we can get the names across to you for that.
Perfect. And of course, if there's anyone else, we'll make sure that you guys all get it. But it's already available on our website. Just type in conferencing Airtame, and you'll get a lot more information on that. And that's where I'm happy to also elaborate in more detail. But I just want to be cautious of the time here. Apologies. Let me just wrap up then here. A lot of the things that we've kind of addressed throughout today is, we're a proven solution in many verticals. We're among the most cost-effective solutions and competitively priced devices in this industry. We've designed with both teachers, students, and business users in mind. We want to make sure it's the most user-friendly and intuitive screen sharing solution out there, because if you're not using it, then what's the point of having a bunch of features and use cases? It's built for change and flexibility in terms of how we actually operate on your network. Going back to that question I had earlier, like, who do you want to connect to this Airtame? The Airtame will be able to help define that process and who should have access to it and so on. And then a bullet point, the final one here, that I think everyone is also really emphasizing these days, and safety first. It's 100% wireless. There's no need to touch any shared device. There's actually going to be no need for shared devices whatsoever. Only your personal device. There's no dongles moving around, there's no cables and so forth. And the management console also doesn't require users having to travel across the country or across the globe, wherever it is, depending on the size of the company. They can do all the management from the cloud. And that actually wraps it up. So I think I saw 2 notifications with another 2 questions. I may be mistaken.
So we've got, there was a few requests for the information, which we'll send back. And
sure.
Is there any way from the cloud analytics to get access to usage, then overlay into Microsoft BI, for instance, to see room usage?
That's a interesting use case, actually. There's no specific integration with BI, even though we're actively looking into it. But we do have a customer success team that can allow the customers, well, can work with the customer on behalf of the reseller, for instance, to get analytics such as which screens are being used more, like which Airtames are being used, to identify which meeting rooms are maybe not set up correctly. You can find out which ones are more popular, how many hours are streamed to the different Airtames across, a month or two, and you can see the uptake and so forth. So yeah, that we can provide. It's not publicly available through the cloud. This is a project that we're working on so that you can have access to it, but you can have access to it by speaking with our customer success team, and we can make sure we either share that information with the reseller or we can share it directly with the customer, but on your behalf. That's entirely up to you how you best work it. We like to be in direct contact with the customer so that we can do a lot of the legwork for you guys.
We've also another one in to ask, is there any plans to integrate with a room booking system?
I mean, in theory, there's a lot of room booking systems out there. And a lot of the room booking systems rely on, the two main systems, Office 365 or G Suite. And in my opinion, I think, we're seeing a growing trend in our 365 being, very, heavily used. And if you're using 365, you're probably using the Outlook calendar for your bookings. If you have a booking room system that's, integrating with that, where you book the room, it's using the 365 platform, which means that Airtame will just pull that information and populate on the screen that's connected to. So there is already that synergy. It is already there. It will actually, most times work. And I'm saying this, take it with a grain of salt, because most solutions, most booking room systems will integrate directly with 365 or G Suite, but there are a few that probably don't. So of course, there we'd have to look at the case and understand, what's actually happening here. But most often than not, there already is that synergy between the two solutions.
And another question, how secure is the device? The customer won't allow Android operating systems.
If they don't want to allow Android operating systems?
Yeah, my customer won't allow Android.
No problem. If you don't want to allow Android operating systems, disable Miracast and Googlecast protocols.
Okay. Fantastic.
Then you can only connect using the Airtame application, which is proprietary, again, available as an MSI or guest or whatever, and you won't have any Android users using it whatsoever. Then you can decide, do you want iOS users to use it? Then you can decide if you want to start using AirPlay or not.
Fantastic. If there's any last questions we want to get in, there will be a copy of this recording available, so we've recorded the session today, so we can send that out and share that, and if anybody wants to share that with staff that weren't available today. And if you've got any questions after, then our contact details are on here, or we can send them out to you directly. If there isn't any more questions, I'd just like to thank Luca today for his time and to going through that. Hopefully, I'm sure everybody found that really useful and a real good deep dive into the Airtame solution itself. But as always, there will be particular questions that may be brought up afterwards. So if you do think of anything, please reach out to us directly, and we're more than happy to help. Either the Northamber staff or the team at Airtame. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time today. Look forward to speaking to a lot of you very soon, and I hope you all stay safe. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've always that exact message. Thank you so much for joining. There's a lot of content we ran through. Very happy to do these on a unique basis as well, if it's tailored to your environment, your customer's environment, or whatever it is. So as Carl mentioned, feel free to contact us with any questions.
Thank you all.
Cool. Thanks, guys.